All right, welcome everybody to the Go Wellness Collaborative. This is your host, Cade Archibald, and I'm like buckle up for a wild ride today. So excited to be with you amazing people on the attendee side, as well as I got some really cool people on the Go Wellness team here with me.
I had a client who we ran her labs and her thyroid antibodies are just through the roof. And her liver enzymes are through the roof. And her alkaline phosphatase was really high. And her C-reactive protein was like 4. And her homocysteine was 17. And, looking at her labs and then looking at her lifestyle, like she'd worked with all the functional medicine doctors and worked with like the thyroid whisperer, whatever the lady called herself. But upon further investigation, I said, well, you don't drink alcohol. We went through the epic killers, the epic triggers. So emotionally, things seem solid there. I mean, obviously she'd had stress, but physically, there's no injuries outside of an injury like 40 years ago, where she had whiplash. But then we got to infections, like chemicals. She's like, I've cleared out everything in my house. I've gotten rid of gluten. And her antibodies just kept getting worse, and her liver enzymes kept going up. But she hadn't gained weight or anything, didn't really have a lot of symptoms. But as we dove in deeper, I'm like, has anyone talked to you about mold? And she's like, no, but that's it. And I'm like, why do you say that? She's like, oh, in the crawl space. And then we went through it all. And it was like that one thing that is the domino that can be interfering with everything. And if you don't get rid of that big interference, we found that you just can't get better. So we took her down a mold protocol. And
It's like, okay, well, what is actually being missed? And that's where we are seeing a lot more Lyme, a lot more mold. We've been finding in Colorado, we've found 3 people with uranium toxicity. So it's like we're getting these rare toxicities in these infections, you know.
that's crazy. We have uranium in a pocket not too far from the clinic in
Yeah.
Sandy, if you know that town.
Yeah.
Because where there's granite, there's going to be uranium. And then there's a pocket of our client base up in Washington State in Wenatchee area.
Mhm.
Uranium.
Uranium. It's crazy, right?
Yeah. We've had a few that we've said, hey, um, how's the quality of the air in your house? And is there potential mold, or has there been any kind of water damage? And in 22, with that big epic snowstorm,
Yeah.
we've been seeing a lot of that work. Kids living downstairs, now they have all these they're expressing these ADHD symptoms. And so we just put the kids on some binders and some nasal sprays, and it's like their behavior just goes right back to normal. But what have you seen?
Yeah, we've had, I think one of the worst cases we had was a kid that had mold exposure, couldn't detoxify it, was diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, just almost violent, responses to any sort of authority. Crazy.
Wow. I think that's where, at-home tests, if people are not quite convinced, and mold remediation, I mean, there's story after story. I mean, I've been dealing with clients in Utah who have mold issues for 20 years.
That's
And,
crazy.
and before I knew a whole lot about it, but I had a couple clients who were really sick. And there's a company called the Green Building Center, and they're out of business now. But any house that I remodeled or built, we always did these very like environmentally friendly things. I don't know. You remember the house on Crestview that I built?
Yeah.
I
Love
mean,
the
there's like
house.
no EMFs. Like my internet wouldn't even work there. I was like, well, I did a really good job. I mean,
No. The
everything's
house is
sealed
like
up tightly.
the house is like a fortress, man.
Oh, it's so crazy. But like the energy was so clean there. And so I've
Yeah.
always been pretty obsessed with it because I'm so sensitive to mold. But the amount of damage that mold can do to the nervous system, and I just see people get run through the rat race. I had a client
Yeah.
yesterday, and he spent a $500,000 on mold, and he's no better than what he was 3 years ago. The cell danger response syndrome. Level 1 is when your your mitochondria go on high alert and they start producing energy outside of the cell wall so that they can send a signal. It's almost like it's the alarms that set off the white blood cells, and that's like the acute infection. And like you mentioned, Dan, most of us, unless you have kind of that that HLA polymorphism, maybe you just clear it out and there's no issue with it. But when that alarm's going off, if it doesn't turn off, then your white blood cells just, they go into a pretty hyper aroused state. And when you
Yeah.
get to cell danger response level 2, then that's really where you start seeing the impact of the mold on the nervous system. And so first thing you want to think of is, well, what pathway is the pathway that most people miss if they've already been down the road of treating mold, and that's the melanocyte stimulating hormone pathway, the MSH pathway. And MSH, I like it because it's like the Wei Qi in Chinese medicine.
If somebody has they get the mold exposure, and this kind of goes back to that testing process. You go, okay, they think or suspect that there's mold exposure. You test their body, you find that there's mold in there. Then you can take it a step up, especially if they're having like really, really, really serious like chronic pain, sleep disturbances, chronic GI issues, prolonged illness. They get cold, they can't get rid of it. Cortisol is all over the place. They'll have adrenal issues, fluid retention issues because their ACTH is thrown off and their aldosterone. You'll see some like big reduction in their sex hormones, especially their androgens and their
Mm.
antidiuretic hormones. So they get all these inflammation symptoms, nerve, muscle, joints, like full body. When you start to impact, you can clear the mold out, no problem. But to see, and Dr. Crater, and I had a lot of conversation about this because he works with a lot of mold, is that these secondary measures that you're looking at, it's like the footprint of how bad it's damaged the body. Those are the things you want to look at. And so on that, you look at glutathione levels. You want to look at their complement C3A and C3-4, or C3A and C4A, their MSH, VIP, and then their MMP9, their VEGF, and their transforming growth factor beta. So those will all be disrupted if that mold has created the chronic inflammatory response. And that's because those are all the things that are driving the GI issues, the fatigue. So when you find those, okay, not only does this person have mold illness, but they also have a chronic inflammatory response that's being driven by it. And that's where that that's all MSH pathway being disrupted. And so if you guys aren't familiar with RGCC, they're a company out of Greece, and they do something called circulating tumor cell testing. And so 1 in 10,000 cells is a cancer cell in someone who has, or a circulating tumor cell, someone who has cancer. And so you can find CTCs in people that are healthy, but over time, those things decline. And so you should see a decrease in their circulating tumor cells. But they're a rare subset of cells that are found in people who do have cancer, especially solid tumors, and they are the seed for metastasis. So when they metastasize through the bloodstream, you'll find these CTCs. It's very rare for one of them to actually get into another. It's like less than 1% of circulating tumor cells actually will become cancer or get into tissue. But it's like the problem is when people are having these issues, they have quite a bit of these. And so what's really awesome is we can identify those. We do a blood biopsy, which is just a blood pool, and you send that to Greece. And what they'll do is they will take and extract the circulating tumor cells. They look at the RNA of the cells, and they start looking at basically the metabolics of the cancer. And so there's a huge report that you get, and it tells you all about the genes. It'll tell you, they'll look based on the DNA what typical chemotherapeutic agents are going to help, and then also what natural chemotherapeutic agents are going to help. It's pretty awesome. One of the therapies that we are using is called SOT therapy. And this is pretty amazing because it is developed by RGCC, and it's supportive oligonucleotide therapy. And what it is when they extract these things, and you can also do this with chronic infections. So what they're doing, so like cancer or any type of microbe, they can identify the RNA, and they'll create the oligonucleotide will create a compound that interferes with the RNA. So what it does is it shuts down the gene replication sequence of these targets, whether it's a cancer cell, virus, or a Lyme, and it eliminates the life cycle. So it creates a 98% specificity to the target genes and doesn't interfere with any human cells. So only the target cell. And it's administered as a single dose. So we can send the blood. And if people want to do the SOT therapy, they'll use the RNA to create the SOT using the oligonucleotides that were in the person's blood. So the two best peptides that we use, because some of the peptides, they're a little questionable if they're going to trigger or not trigger, but have a stimulatory effect with cancer. So epitalin, universally amazing for that, and GHK copper also shuts down some cancer life cycles. So those are the two that we commonly use with if we're dealing with some type of cancer. But even the Mayo Clinic, we had a client that was going there for chronic leukemia, and they gave us clearance to give him epitalin. So it was awesome, and he was in a clinical trial. So, but they were good with it, and it changed. It really made that guy feel amazing. It's crazy. He's like, I feel like I can breathe fire. It was so awesome. So yeah, we use epitalin quite a bit. And and this is where you have to dig in and do some research. Like, what do we know these things off? Like here, we see that the person's this particular transformed growth factor beta that's turned on is very sensitive to heat. So their heat shock proteins are there. So it would be good for them to be doing like sauna therapy.
Do sauna, do some heat shock therapy. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what's really awesome about this, there's a lot of information out there on things that interfere with cancer. And what you want to do is just make sure that you're recommending things that are actually showing to have some impact on that person's cancer. They're not wasting their time doing stuff that's not going to do anything.
Hopefully we'll see you guys on the other side there. And love you all very much. You have an amazing rest of your day. Friday, finish the week strong, and then we will be back. I believe it is the first Friday of next month. So we will see everybody back on the collaborative on April 4th. That's also my dad's birthday. So we'll be celebrating Rick Archibald there. So awesome. You guys have an amazing Friday. Thanks for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you guys next time.